Alright, welcome back folks. In today's video we're looking at something really crazy, something I actually honestly did not expect to come out at all, given the actual kind of release schedule of this has been completely hidden. I don't know who this person is, but it's essentially Bioshock in VR, done in the Source 2 engine, using all the same mechanics that we've come to know and love from the Alex gameplay. And of course we've got sort of a custom take on it here with a sort of return to Rapture. There's an entirely separate storyline that this individual came up with, and I would have to say that probably this guy is some kind of master world builder, or at least a very good mapping enthusiast who's clearly had quite a decent bit of practice in the Alex engine at this point, or at least using the custom SDK that's come out recently. But let's take a look at this now, because this has been done in such a way that it honestly feels very AAA. I don't know how many people have worked with this guy on this particular game, but I do have to say that as a whole the presentation is great. There's even a nod to what's going to be in the Half-Life custom-made games that people are working on now to continue the Half-Life 3 story, which again is just a very interesting nod to that whole universe. But as it stands, you know, the production value here is just absolutely mind-blowing. I don't really know how they were able to pull this off, or how they were able to keep it as kind of much of a secret as they have. At least personally, I haven't heard anything about this until this, you know, obviously much more recent release. I believe this just dropped sometime earlier today, maybe at some point last night. This is the first that I've kind of heard of it and seen some gameplays that people have done, and just kind of wanted to give you guys my own personal impressions. Now, I've definitely cut this back quite a bit because there's certain sort of scenes that you're better off just kind of seeing on your own. I will kind of show some of the intro sections here so you can get an idea of what it's like. The gameplay is honestly just a ton of fun, nothing that you wouldn't expect from the Half-Life Alyx games as a whole. Now, they do seem to have some enemy types, from what I've seen so far, that are actually from the Bioshock lore, and also bits and pieces kind of strewn about on audio recorders, etc. So again, it's got a very Bioshock feel to it, very awesome to return to this world in VR, and of course, you know, the presentation here is just top-notch. Again, completely out of left field, this one. I honestly had no clue this was coming whatsoever, and it plays really well. I've, you know, had pretty good performance with it overall. It does stutter in certain sections that I found using my 1080 Ti and my 3700X, so you may have better performance if you have better hardware. But with that said, you know, for the most part, I didn't see too many hitching issues or anything like that to the point where it would dip too much. I did see a couple of reprojected frames here and there, but with that said, again, just very, very good performance. Again, you can see some of the models that are from the original Bioshock. Now, what's interesting here is that they have sort of modified some of the animations, or possibly made custom ones for some enemy types here, but it's not 100% clear if all of them have been redone in the same way. I haven't quite gotten far enough into this mod just yet, but you can pick it up on the Steam Workshop now. Essentially, I'll put a link in the video description so you guys can check it out yourselves. But again, just looking at this, it brings back so many memories. And even though I'm not really the biggest fan of the Bioshock series as a whole, given that the gameplay is relatively kind of derivative, I did always like the aesthetics of that title, and I think that was probably its biggest selling point. Now, given that Source 2 has generally had pretty poor water interactivity, I'm not sure if they're going to be having any levels where water bursts through or floods certain sections, so we'll see how that goes. They do have some pretty good water bottle physics in the game, or at least the physics for the water that's inside the actual bottle, so we'll see if any of that is able to be sort of scaled up in here. But so far, at least during my playthrough, I didn't see anything that was, you know, specifically mind-blowing in regards to the water, but again, I am still very early on in the game, so it's kind of hard to say where this will all ultimately land. However, again, just the art direction and the way they've nailed the level design from Bioshock, it really comes through in this particular kind of level. Now, they do have multiple sections. I believe there's supposed to be 8 chapters to this kind of whole little adventure, which is really cool. because it just shows you a lot of effort has been put into making this pretty incredible. Now again, I haven't seen too many classic Bioshock enemies. It is still using a lot of the Alex AI, so you'll see combine soldiers, zombies, and head crabs, which is honestly kind of an interesting take, but possibly not entirely far-fetched given the Half-Life universe. However, perhaps not the best fit for the Bioshock theme, perhaps. With that said, again, I don't know how big this team was, and the effort here is pretty incredulous as a whole. You can just see that they've nailed the sort of destroyed level atmosphere and all of the sort of rampants and all the various different kind of architecture that's been laid out all over the place. It definitely mimics Bioshock in a very significant way, so you get that real biopunk feeling out of the level design, which I think is, again, just a monumental task that they've accomplished here, because honestly it harks back to a lot of the earlier Bioshock titles. Now, not 100% clear if the inspiration came from both games or just the first one primarily, as the levels at least seem to really invoke feelings of the first game more so than the second, and they've also put a lot of sort of communist architecture into this as well, with a lot of nods to Lenin specifically, and I'm not sure if that was done as a joke or if that's going to play a bigger role in this title at some point down the road. Not really too clear just yet, but as you can see here, we've got some audio logs that you're able to pick up and listen to, not unlike what you would have done sort of in the original games back in the day. Now, not all objects are interactable. You can't, for example, pick up those chairs. However, they did break up the game into very interesting puzzle pieces where you're going to be looking around for certain things to do and then getting into combat shortly thereafter. Again, doing a pretty good job of pacing here, even despite the short sections I've played so far. The action felt like it was well balanced with some exploratory sections, as well as just being able to look around and take in the atmosphere of the world that they have crafted. And I think this is kind of a big deal because, again, this is not something you typically see from most Half-Life Alyx mods. A lot of them have been kind of maps that are essentially just wave defense modes, or maybe they've recreated levels from Half-Life 2 in the engine, and then that's kind of what you get. With this, however, you get essentially an entirely new game, pretty much from the ground up. Now, it's not to say that it's a full-on modification of everything across the board. There are certainly still a ton of Alyx elements here. It's not like they've redone the UI, and it's not as if they're using Bioshock weapons. It would have been cool to see some of those weapons introduced, but I'm sure that even ripping those and creating new animations would have probably taken a Herculean effort that they probably just didn't have a whole lot of time to do. And with that said, you're looking at something pretty incredible as it stands with the environments that they've created. Again, really interesting mix of the sort of art style of Alyx at the same time mixed in with Bioshock. Now, I haven't seen too many of the enemy varieties, such as the runners from the original Bioshock game, the splicers to be more precise, who have the syringes in their hands, etc. It is possible that maybe those will come in at a later point in the game. I haven't seen them just yet, but even then, with the Alyx AI, they do a pretty good job of selling the atmosphere of the game and just the creepiness factor of everything. It's pretty incredible. Now, I don't really know how many more chapters they'll do like this, and I'm not sure if you can play this in co-op with friends. So far, it seems like mainly it's just basically a single-player add-on. Now, to activate this, I did find that I had to go into the game options and actually click on the add-on and go in to enable it first before I could click in to play it. It didn't just play on its own after installing it from the Steam Workshop, so that is something to look out for as you sort of delve into this a little bit deeper. Now, I have found that there are certain spots where I get dips, especially at a later point where I get into a firefight on the staircase. Now, this could be something that is specific to my machine, so you may not necessarily see it on your side. I honestly kind of don't know. For me, like I said, the performance has generally been favorable, and you can see my frame rates up in that left corner there. So generally just keep an eye on that and see how it does, as it may be kind of conducive to what the experience will be for you, or at least it will be conducive to you getting in on this and having fun in general. I found that the AI can be a little bit glitchy at times in terms of the navigation that they take through the levels, but for the most part they do an okay job. I have not had issues where they glitched out completely. However, there are definitely sections where they'll get stuck on certain bits of debris, and I guess that's just some pathfinding that potentially needs to be fixed at some point down the road. With that said, however, in my limited playthrough of this, I didn't run into any major bugs, surprisingly, aside from just the occasional enemy clipping into an object they probably shouldn't have. So I would definitely recommend this title to you guys because it is a lot of fun. You get to experience Bioshock in VR, and this is arguably a much better way to do it than using something like TriDef 3D or WarpX or any of those other sort of hacky 3D solutions that just make a side-by-side screen for you to play VR in, because they don't actually add any of the tracked controllers, so you're still stuck using a regular controller, a mouse and keyboard, versus something like the Index or, using your Vive Ones, whatever, VR controller you end up using for this. Pretty much all of them should work since it's just the Alex basically game engine running with nothing really specific happening outside of that. So with that said, again, check this game out. I'll put the link in the description so you guys can take a look. There have been a number of gameplay videos released on this so far, so you can also come and check those out. I'll see if I can do a proper stream on this, because it just looks like a really fun kind of little distraction to play. And again, one of the better mods that I've seen in the Alex engine in terms of the lighting and everything. They've just absolutely knocked this one out of the park. So stick around and check out my stream at some point later on.